and how certain things are characterized. There's an issue around the characterization of the leadership nominations for the top six as slates. It's been described as the Zuma slate, as the Motlanthe slate. Well, let's talk a little bit about that. Joining us is a member of the NEC who's been nominated again to serve there. She's also Deputy Minister in Public Service and Administration. Dlodlo, good morning to you. Welcome.
Thank you
Very much for joining us this morning. So the Zuma slate won yesterday.
I don't think there was a Zuma slate, because if you notice, for instance, the Secretary General, Comrade Gwedo Mantashe, was on many lists. Comrade Jesse Duarte was not contested. So from that perspective, I do not see a slate. Because if there was a slate, she would have been contested. Gwedo Mantashe would not have appeared in many lists. So for my part, the team that is with Jacob Zuma as officials now was not nominated on a slate.
Okay. Let's explore this a little bit more. So someone like Tokyo Sexwale, for instance, was not on many lists. He was on the one, what is characterized as a slate. Matthew Posa was on the one side, Fikile Mbalula and that kind of thing. So, I mean, is the term slate a problematic term?
We've always said, I mean, after Polokwane, the ANC has always said that the slate way of doing things is not what we would want to see in the ANC, because it creates a bit of problems. It shortchanges us in terms of the kind of people that we'd like to see in leadership positions. But again, I must emphasize that in this leadership team that has been elected, for me, it doesn't depict a slate. As I said, you have Jesse Duarte, who was uncontested, and a lot of people had been talking about her. But you also have Gwedo Mantashe, who also appeared in many if you want to call it slates, maybe, but Gwedo Mantashe was nominated by not just the team that would have nominated Jacob Zuma, for instance. Yeah.
When you say it deprives the ANC of leadership, is this not an ANC conversation? Is this not a conversation within the ANC to say, how do we do things going forward? How do we ensure that we have access as the ANC, as the party, to the best possible leadership? Because in many ways, perhaps the branding comes from the way the ANC itself has been functioning from Polokwane and beyond.
I'm not sure what you mean that it's in the branding in the way that it has been functioning, because from the first NEC that I attended after Polokwane, the continuous message by President Jacob Zuma was that of unity. We preached unity from day one. Certain things fell along the wayside. There were acts of ill discipline in certain instances, but it was something that we had always decried as the leadership of the African National Congress. And I think even at branch level in provinces, the issue of discipline has always been a problem that we have decried as a leadership.
So how were the candidates then sold to the branches? Was it a question of, you can nominate anybody? Or was it a question of, this is a grouping that we think represents what potentially is best within the ANC right now? And then other people came in and said, this is a grouping that we think could. So how was it sold in the branches? How was it communicated?
For us who oversaw some of the processes leading up to the PGMs, it was very clear that you had to use certain documents that would guide the process. And one of those documents was through the eye of the needle. Now, through the eye of the needle informs members of the ANC as to what it is that you need to look at when you decide on a leadership core that you would want to elect. Nobody in any of the PGMs that I attended, nobody went about with a list to say, these are the people that we're looking at. People thought of people that they thought would be able to lead the ANC, that would be able to unite the ANC, but that would also be able to revive the image of the ANC in the eyes of the public.
Let's talk about discipline. You talked about matters of ill discipline that came through as time went by. Just talk to us about discipline within the ANC right now.
I think we've seen people characterizing themselves outside the value system of the African National Congress and also outside the unwritten codes and traditions of the African National Congress. From where some of us come from, Voyo, you would never speak ill of authority, which means your leadership. Platforms are created in the ANC where you would be able to criticize, because criticism is what is welcomed in the African National Congress. It's part of the DNA of the ANC, criticism and self-criticism. Now, people had platforms, those that felt that the leadership was weak, they had the platform, which was the NEC, to raise those matters. Those who were members of the African National Congress's NEC. Those that belonged to branches had branch meetings where they could criticize the leadership to no end, for that matter. But people then decided to define themselves outside the collective of the African National Congress and went out publicly criticizing a leadership that they were a part of, and never brought those criticisms into structures and platforms that are created by the African National Congress. For me, that in itself is just gross discipline. You cannot disrespect the African National Congress and its leadership by going out and criticizing what you could not criticize internally. I'm not saying that we shouldn't criticize one another. It's part of who we are as the African National Congress. But you need to choose your platform very well.
So the problem is criticizing not inside the ANC. If you criticize outside of the ANC, that's the issue.
You can't be part of the leadership core and go out and criticize a leadership core that you are a part of when you couldn't even raise those issues in the NEC, for instance.
Is that an expression of frustration, though? That, sometimes you are talking about these issues, you are not heard. So maybe it makes sense to break ranks. And once you've broken ranks, maybe the sense begins to emerge that, well, there's a voice that's saying something else. Let's listen a little bit.
Breaking rank for me, Vuyo, is a problem. It is ill discipline. I have not heard anybody who has raised matters of frustration in leadership in the NEC that has been booed down, that has been stopped from talking about whatever it is that they thought was a problem with the leadership. So I still cannot understand why people would have gone out into the public and laid bare the problems that they think are existing in the ANC.
Would you say the ANC is a more disciplined organization now? There's more discipline within the ANC now?
Well, because we've taken disciplinary measures against people that thought were above the ANC, that has brought some bit of confidence in our people and also within our membership that at least things do happen, that discipline is part of what any member of the ANC is supposed to live by, and that we cannot tolerate that. But as long as we do not act decisively, on time and consistently on discipline, the impression that we give to the general public is that we are tolerant of deviant behavior.
Let me ask you the question in a different way. There has been a view where people have said, look, the ANC seems to be dealing with things, with settling political scores, as opposed to disciplining members. In that, perhaps there's also where people don't perform, and they, in a way, bring the ANC into disrepute, whether local government, provincial government, so on. That kind of discipline is not effected. So how do you deal with that?
Well, that's some of the things that we have been discussing, for instance, in the Organizational Renewal and Strategy and Tactics Commissions yesterday and day before yesterday. Discipline is not about people doing things within the African National Congress and bringing the ANC into disrepute in the fashion that you would have seen in the past. But you're correct to say that if you engage in corrupt activity, that brings the organization into disrepute.
You know what I want to do? I want to give you a chance to respond in a little bit more detail, but we also must take the news headlines. So if you let me, we'll take the news headlines and then we'll come back and we'll